Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The night was still and moonlit over the English countryside, and the soft wind that passed through the fields carried whispers of old magic. In the distance, beyond the narrow lanes that wound between quiet villages, a lone figure strode along a cobblestone path. Her cloak was deep blue, trimmed with silver thread, and it fluttered as she walked, swift, purposeful, and a little weary. Hermione Granger had seen many long nights in her life, but few like this. Once she had fought in wars and uncovered dark secrets that had threatened the wizarding world. Now, years later, she served as deputy head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, a position of enormous responsibility, but one that suited her mind and her need for purpose. Yet tonight's case was unlike any she had faced before. 3 witches and 2 wizards had vanished in the past month. No trace of them except for what appeared to be perfect doubles left behind, going about their lives as if nothing had happened. Only days later did the truth come to light. The doubles began to falter. They forgot names, stumbled over spells, and finally dissolved into nothing but silver mist. The ministry had no answers. Some whispered about polyjuice gone wrong, others about dark enchantments, but Hermione knew better. She could feel that peculiar hum in her wand hand, the unmistakable pull of something ancient, something intentional. Her boots clicked against the stone as she arrived at a small cottage on the outskirts of Hogsmeade, the home of the most recent victim, a retired auror named Mildred Hawkes. A few candles flickered in the windows, though no one was meant to be home. Inside, all was still. Dust motes drifted in the lamplight. A teacup sat half full on the table, its contents long cooled. Hermione raised her wand. "Lumos," she whispered, and soft light filled the room. There, by the window, stood Mildred. At least, Hermione thought it was her. The witch's eyes were hollow, her expression dazed. She smiled faintly, though her lips trembled as if holding back confusion. "Mrs. Hawkes?" Hermione asked gently. The woman turned her head. "Ah, you're from the ministry, aren't you? I was just about to go feed the owls." Hermione's heart sank. She'd heard the same story before. The illusions behaved normally, repeating their last memories as though caught in a loop. But Mildred's doppelganger looked so real. The way she adjusted her shawl, the tremor in her hand. It was uncanny. Hermione conjured a small golden thread of light and cast it toward the woman. The spell revealed traces of unstable magic surrounding her, flickering and collapsing like smoke in wind. "I'm afraid you're not who you think you are," Hermione murmured. Mildred blinked, confusion clouding her features. "Not who I think I am," she repeated softly, and then she began to fade. Hermione reached out instinctively, but the air where Mildred had stood turned cold. The woman's image dissolved into a mist of silvery vapor, curling upward toward the ceiling before vanishing completely. Only silence remained. Hermione exhaled slowly and looked around the empty room. On the mantelpiece sat an old photograph. Mildred and her husband, years ago, smiling before a modest cottage garden. A chill passed through Hermione's spine as she noticed something new in the frame. A faint reflection of herself, standing between them, though she had never been in that picture. She drew back sharply. Her pulse quickened. It was as if the illusion had recognized her. Back at the ministry long after midnight, Hermione sat across from Harry Potter in her office. Papers and enchanted photographs were strewn across her desk. Harry, now head of the Auror office, looked older, calmer, but still bore the sharp glint of determination in his eyes. "So they all disappear," he said, scanning the notes. "And their doubles melt away." Hermione nodded. "Yes. And there's more. The magical residue around each site is identical, like a signature." Ron Weasley, who sat beside them munching on a pasty, frowned. "You're saying it's the same caster every time?" "I don't know if it's a caster," Hermione replied, "but something or someone is using reflection-based magic, deep, old enchantments, possibly tied to memory itself." Harry leaned forward. "You think it could be connected to the Department of Mysteries?" Hermione hesitated. The thought had already crossed her mind. The Unspeakables had once studied the boundaries between identity and memory. There had been rumors, half-whispered stories, of experiments gone wrong, mirrors that didn't just reflect but replicated. Before she could answer, her desk lamp flickered. Then again, the office temperature dropped several degrees. "Did you feel that?" Ron said, rubbing his arms. Hermione turned. In the darkened glass of her office window, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Her own reflection was smiling, though she was not. Harry rose to his feet, wand drawn. "Hermione!" But before he could finish, the reflection's eyes glowed faintly gold, and a whisper echoed in the air, soft as a sigh. "Find the mirror before it finds you." The glass cracked. The light went out. Hermione stood frozen in the darkness, her mind racing faster than her heartbeat. Whatever had begun with the vanished witches and wizards had now turned its gaze upon her. And deep in the shadows of the Ministry's forgotten chambers, something ancient stirred. A mirror that remembered what it had once shown and now longed to reclaim its lost image. The night after the mirror's whisper, Hermione found herself unable to sleep. Her mind churned with questions about the doubles, the mirror, and that chilling voice that had spoken her name. She sat in her study at home, the fire burning low, parchment spread before her in neat, purposeful rows. Crookshanks dozed in the corner, tail twitching with the restless dreams of old cats. Hermione traced her quill over the same words she had written an hour before. Reflection enchantments, known examples, Mirror of Arist, Foglass, the Pensive. She frowned. None of them could create living doubles. Not truly. A faint knock came at the door. "Still awake?" Harry's voice drifted through soft, but edged with concern. She waved him in. He looked travel-worn, as if he too had been pacing his home until the night itself gave up. He carried a small, battered folder. "I spoke with an unspeakable," he said, without preamble. "Off the record. She told me there's a chamber under the old Department of Mysteries that isn't listed in the archives anymore. It was sealed decades ago, after an incident." Hermione straightened. "What kind of incident?" Harry set the folder on the table. The pages were yellowed and faintly scorched. Inside, among old reports and sketches, was a drawing, a mirror rimmed with runes, its surface rippling like water. "They called it the Mirror of Memory," he said. "It was created as an experiment after the Mirror of Arist was recovered from Hogwarts. The idea was to build something that didn't just show what one desired, but what one remembered. The unspeakables tried to use it to extract memories, make perfect copies of them outside the mind. Hermione leaned closer, heart hammering. Copies of memory. If those memories were strong enough, powerful enough, they could manifest as physical forms. Harry nodded grimly. Exactly. They stopped the experiments after it began producing echoes, partial versions of people. They called them reflections. The project was abandoned, the mirror locked away. She swallowed hard, and now someone's reawakened it. The fire flickered violently as though agreeing. The following morning, Hermione, Harry, and Ron made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Ministry. Few people were awake at that hour, and those who were gave them curious glances. It was not often that all three of them worked together these days. At the entrance to the Department of Mysteries, the air was thick and cool, humming faintly with the power of concealed knowledge. The unspeakable who met them, a silent woman with white hair and unreadable eyes, handed Hermione a small silver key. "You didn't get this from me," she said simply, and turned away. The descent was long and steep. Dust coated the walls, and faint traces of protective spells glimmered like cobwebs in wand light. When at last they reached the bottom, the air grew colder, sharper, as if reality itself resisted being disturbed. The corridor ended in a great stone door carved with mirrored runes. Hermione pressed the key into a narrow slot, and with a sound like a sigh, the seal released. Inside was a vast circular chamber lit by a pale blue glow. The walls were lined with mirrors, some cracked, some clouded, some whispering faintly, as if remembering voices from long ago. And in the center stood a single mirror, twice the height of a man, framed in black stone that shimmered like moonlit obsidian. The mirror of memory. Its surface rippled as they approached, though no one's reflection appeared. Ron shifted uneasily. "I've got a bad feeling about this," he muttered. Hermione stepped closer, wand raised. "It's reacting," she said softly. "To me." For a moment nothing happened. Then the mirror's surface cleared, and there she was, standing within it. Not her reflection, but another Hermione. Her mirror self smiled, her expression calm, almost gentle. "Welcome back," the reflection said. Ron swore under his breath. Harry stepped forward. "What are you?" The reflection's eyes never left Hermione. "I am what she left behind," it said. "The part that remembers." Hermione's pulse pounded in her ears. "What do you mean?" But before she could reach for her wand, the mirror flared with blinding light. A gust of cold wind swept through the chamber, and when the brightness faded, the mirror was empty, and there were two Hermiones standing side by side. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Both Hermiones looked identical. The same curls, the same cautious expression, even the same scratch on her left hand from that morning's quill. Harry's voice was low. "We need to get back to the surface. Now." But neither Hermione moved. The one on the left, his Hermione, looked dazed. The one on the right, new, unfamiliar, smiled faintly. "I told you," said the double. "The mirror remembers, and now it has made me real again." The words echoed strangely, as if two voices spoke in unison. The air around them shimmered, and Hermione felt her own thoughts tremble, as though someone were sifting through her memories. Harry raised his wand. "Step away from her." The double tilted her head. "You can't destroy what is part of her," she said softly. "I am every memory she's ever buried, every decision she's questioned. You destroy me, and you destroy her." The floor shook. Cracks spread along the chamber walls. The other mirrors began to hum, their surfaces trembling as if eager to awaken. Hermione's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough! If you are part of me, then tell me, what do you want?" The reflection's eyes met hers, dark and steady. "To be whole." Then the mirror shattered. A storm of glass and light filled the air. Hermione felt herself pulled backward as a wave of energy rushed outward, throwing all three of them to the ground. When she opened her eyes, the chamber was in ruins, the mirror nothing but shards scattered across the floor. Harry groaned, pushing himself upright. "Everyone all right?" Ron coughed. "Still breathing?" Hermione stood slowly, her heart still racing, but when Harry turned toward her, the color drained from his face. "Hermione," he said quietly, "your reflection, it's gone." She frowned. "Of course it's gone. The mirror broke." "No," he said, voice tight. "I mean, it's gone. You're not casting one." Hermione turned toward the nearest wall, where torchlight flickered across smooth black stone. The light fell around her, but not through her. There was no reflection, no shadow that matched her shape. A cold dread settled deep within her chest. The double had vanished, yes, but it had taken something with it, something she could not yet name. And somewhere, far below the ruined chamber, in the labyrinth of the Department of Mysteries, a fragment of glass pulsed faintly with light, like a heartbeat, waiting to return. The morning after the mirror shattered, the ministry was heavy with whispers. Word had spread, though no one seemed to know how. The Department of Mysteries was sealed off again, unspeakables posted at every entrance. Rumors curled through the air like smoke, of magic gone wrong, of reflections walking without masters. Hermione moved through the ministry corridors with purpose, though every step felt less certain than the last. The torches flickered oddly as she passed, their light bending away from her instead of casting her shadow. Even the portraits she crossed seemed uneasy, the painted figures falling silent when she neared. Harry had insisted she take the day off, but Hermione could not rest, not when she had seen that mirror, had seen herself step from it, and not when the reflection had spoken, as if it carried her memories, her fears, her doubts. She entered her office and locked the door behind her. A mirror hung over the fireplace, small and circular. She faced it and felt the now familiar chill settle in her chest. Her reflection was gone. No face met her gaze. No movement echoed her own. The glass remained smooth and empty, as if it reflected nothing at all. Her fingers trembled. She lifted her wand and whispered, "Revelio." The mirror glowed faintly, and for a heartbeat she saw something shimmer behind the glass. A figure distant and watching. Then it faded. The magic was still there. The connection had not broken. Before she could cast another spell, a knock came. Ron entered, red-haired and wide-eyed. "You didn't show up at the debrief? Harry's worried sick." "I'm fine," Hermione said quickly. "There's just something I need to confirm." Ron eyed her warily. "You sure? You look like you haven't slept in a week." Hermione managed a thin smile. "That's because I haven't." He frowned, stepping closer. "Listen, I know that mirror business shook you up. But if it's true that thing copied memories, maybe it took yours too. Maybe we can..." "Ron." She turned toward him, and he fell silent. For a moment, her eyes looked strange, too bright, too sharp. Then she blinked, and they were her own again. "Sorry," she murmured. "You're right. I'll rest. Just give me a little time." He nodded reluctantly. All right, but promise me you'll come by later. We'll have dinner with Harry, yeah? Ginny's making stew. When he left, Hermione's smile faded. She leaned against her desk, heart pounding. That brief flicker in her eyes, she'd seen it reflected in the glass before the mirror shattered. Gold, like sunlight caught in water. Something was still inside her. That evening she apparated to her home in the countryside, a quiet place surrounded by apple trees and silence. The sky was gray and brooding, rain threatening to fall. She set her wand on the table and lit a single candle. Its flame danced uneasily. From the window's glass, something moved. She turned sharply. There, outside in the rain, stood a figure beneath the trees. A woman with wild brown hair, wearing a cloak, darkened by water. For one terrible moment, Hermione thought it was her reflection returned, but the woman stepped closer, and Hermione saw that her face was older, lined by time and sorrow. She whispered a charm to open the door, wand at the ready. "Who are you?" The woman hesitated at the threshold. "I was one of them," she said. Her voice trembled with exhaustion. "One of the reflections." Hermione's breath caught. "That's not possible." The reflections dissolved. "Most did," the woman interrupted, "but not all. Some of us escaped before the mirror's power failed. We live in the spaces between, half in your world, half in the glass. We remember what you do not." The candle flickered wildly. Hermione stepped closer. "What do you mean, what I do not?" The woman's eyes were full of pity. "You think the mirror took something from you, but it did not steal. It returned. There is a part of you that was lost long ago, and the mirror gave it shape." "Lost?" Hermione whispered. "Your memory," the woman said softly. "The memory of what you sacrificed to win that war." Hermione's blood ran cold. She remembered the final battle vividly, every spell, every friend, every loss. But even now, when she tried to recall one particular moment, after Voldemort fell, after the fighting ceased, there was only darkness. She'd always told herself it was shock, the mind's mercy. The woman shook her head. "You buried it to protect yourself. The mirror only showed it back to you. Your reflection is not your enemy. She is the part of you that remembers." "Where is she now?" Hermione demanded. The woman lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward the distant hills. "In the ruins beneath the Department of Mysteries. She is waiting." Before Hermione could speak again, lightning split the sky. The woman flinched, and her body began to shimmer. Her outline grew thin, transparent, like smoke unraveling in wind. "Wait!" Hermione cried, rushing forward. The woman smiled faintly. "Find her, Hermione, before the glass shatters again." Then she was gone. Only rain filled the silence. Hermione sank to her knees, the candle flickering beside her. The weight of the woman's words pressed down like stone. She could no longer pretend this was only ministry business. The magic that had created her reflection was bound to her own past, and now it was unraveling. At dawn, she stood in her kitchen, pale but resolute. Her wand gleamed faintly in her hand. She drew her cloak around her shoulders and stepped into the mist. By the time she reached the ministry, Harry was waiting. His eyes were dark with worry. "You went to the surface ruins last night, didn't you?" he said quietly. Hermione hesitated. "I spoke with one of the reflections." He froze. "They're alive?" "In a manner of speaking." She met his gaze. "Harry, my reflection isn't gone. She's alive. And she remembers something that I've forgotten, something the mirror wanted me to see." He exhaled slowly. "Then we find her. The decision was made. Together they descended once more into the forbidden corridors of the Department of Mysteries. The torches along the walls burned blue instead of gold, and the air hummed with restless magic. The shattered chamber lay ahead, eerily silent. The shards of the mirror of memory still glittered faintly across the floor like stars scattered in dust. Hermione knelt beside one and touched it gently. A pulse of light answered her, echoing through her fingertips. She closed her eyes, and in that instant she saw a battlefield torn by flame and fear, Harry shouting her name. The final spell, Voldemort's magic colliding with his own, and behind it, her own desperate act, a charm whispered under her breath, cast not at her enemy, but at herself, a memory charm, one strong enough to erase something unbearable. Hermione gasped and drew back. Harry caught her shoulder. "What did you see?" She looked up, her face pale, eyes wide. "I didn't just fight to save the world, Harry. I fought to forget something." And in the broken shards around them, the reflection's voice whispered faintly, almost tender, "Then remember me." The light of the ruins dimmed, and the glass began to glow once more, each fragment awakening one by one, as if the mirror itself were reassembling. And somewhere within that gathering light, a figure began to take shape again. The air in the shattered chamber turned heavy, charged with the strange energy of waking magic. The shards of the mirror trembled upon the floor, like fragments of moonlight caught in a storm. Each piece pulsed with its own glow, humming in harmony, as if called by a voice older than the room itself. Harry and Hermione stepped back as the fragments began to drift upward, drawn together by invisible threads. The sound that followed was low and resonant, like wind moving through an ancient cathedral. "It's rebuilding itself," Harry whispered. Hermione's hand tightened around her wand. "No, it's being rebuilt. Something is calling it." She raised her wand and cast a counter curse, but the spell broke before it touched the mirror's forming edge. The pieces fused faster, forming a shape that shimmered like liquid glass. Then, within its depths, a figure began to take form, a woman's silhouette, graceful, steady, and eerily familiar. Hermione took a step forward. The figure solidified. It was her reflection, restored. But this time her eyes were different. They glowed faintly gold, the same hue Hermione had seen in her own eyes for an instant the night before. The reflection smiled, not cruelly, but with a strange gentleness, as though pitying her. "Why do you fight what is yours?" the reflection said softly. Hermione's voice trembled, though she stood her ground. "Because you are not me." The reflection tilted her head, her expression calm. "And yet without me, you cannot see what you have lost." "Show me then," Hermione demanded. "Show me what you claim I've forgotten." The mirror flared, and the world spun. The chamber dissolved into mist, the torches flickering out. Harry's voice vanished into silence. Hermione felt herself falling, not through space, but through memory. When the mist cleared, she stood on the grounds of Hogwarts. But it was not as she remembered. The castle loomed in the distance, half shrouded in smoke, its towers cracked and burning. The night of the final battle. Figures rushed past her, students, teachers, aurors, all locked in the chaos of war. Spells streaked across the sky, bursts of red and green and gold. She tried to move, to speak, but her body felt like a ghost, untethered from the world around her, and there, among the fighting, was herself. Hermione watched as her younger self darted between spells, her wand flashing with precision. She saw Harry and Ron near the entrance to the Great Hall, shouting something she could not hear. Then her younger self stopped, eyes wide. A Death Eater's curse hurtled toward Ron. She reacted instantly, raising her wand, shouting an incantation Hermione did not remember ever learning. The spell struck the Death Eater, but it did more than defend. It shattered the air itself, a sound like breaking glass filling the battlefield. Magic rippled outward, wild and untamed. It wrapped around her younger self like fire. Hermione gasped. She remembered the aftermath of that moment. Ron alive, Harry victorious, but not what she had done to make it so. The reflection's voice came from beside her, though she did not turn. You cast a spell that should not exist. Old magic. Magic that trays memory for life. You saved them, and you buried the price. The younger Hermione fell to her knees, clutching her head as the curse took hold. Her wand hand shook. She whispered something, words barely audible even to her own ears. Forget the pain, forget the cost. Then everything went white. When the light faded, Hermione stood once more in the chamber beneath the ministry. The mirror loomed before her whole again. Her reflection stepped forward from the glass, the last traces of battle still reflected in her golden eyes. You see now, the reflection murmured. I am the part of you that remembers what you erased. Hermione's throat was tight. And what do you want? The reflection reached out, her hand hovering just above the surface of the mirror. To return to you, to make you whole. Without me, your magic will continue to unravel. Harry stepped closer, his voice firm. Don't listen. It's manipulating you. That mirror's cursed. But Hermione could feel the truth in the reflection's words. Her magic had felt unstable, her spells faltering, her reflections gone, her memories fragile. The mirror had split her, leaving part of her mind sealed within its depths. If I refuse, she asked. The reflection's smile faded. Then the mirror will claim what remains. It was not meant to be opened again. Soon it will not distinguish between illusion and life. Every reflection it ever created will seek its source. Hermione turned to Harry. That means... He nodded grimly. The others, the missing witches and wizards. They'll come back, Hermione whispered, realization dawning, but not as themselves. Even as she spoke, the mirror's glow deepened, its surface swirling with countless shapes, faces of those who had vanished, pressing against the glass, desperate and half-formed. Their voices whispered in unison, "Remember us." The sound was like wind through broken leaves, sorrowful and endless. The mirror's power was rising again, and this time it sought completion. Hermione felt it pull at her, tugging like a tide. Her reflection extended her hand once more. Let me return, and I can seal it. Together we can stop it before it consumes the world. Harry shook his head sharply. You don't know what that'll do to you, Hermione. If you merge with that thing. She's not a thing, Hermione said quietly. She's me. The reflection's eyes softened. Yes. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. The air shimmered, heavy with the weight of the choice. Hermione thought of all she had fought for, the friends she'd lost, the peace they had built, the fragile world that depended on her to protect it. Then she stepped toward the mirror. Harry caught her arm. Don't. She looked at him, eyes full of steady resolve. If I don't, this magic will spread. It's already begun. I have to finish what I started that night. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Then I'm staying with you. A small, sad smile touched her lips. Always the hero. Together they faced the mirror. Hermione placed her palm against the glass, and her reflection did the same. The surface rippled like water. Cold fire coursed through her veins as the connection closed. She saw flashes, memories long buried, laughter by the lake, tears after the war, the faces of those who had fallen, and beneath it all the endless echo of her own voice, whispering across years of silence. Remember, her reflection leaned forward, merging with her touch. Light exploded through the chamber, spilling down the corridors and up toward the surface, washing over the ministry like dawn breaking after endless night. When the brilliance faded, the mirror stood empty once more. The glass was clear, the whispers gone. Hermione collapsed to her knees, Harry catching her before she fell. Her eyes fluttered open, calm and luminous. For the first time in days, her reflection returned in the fragments around her, perfectly matched, alive once more. "It's over," she whispered. Harry looked at her searchingly. "Are you... you?" She smiled faintly. "Yes, but now I remember everything." And in the quiet that followed, far beneath the earth where no one could hear, the faintest echo trembled through the glass, soft, content, and final. "Thank you." The days that followed the mirror's sealing were strange and uneasy. The ministry hummed with quiet relief, yet beneath the surface, a subtle dread lingered. The unspeakables moved through the corridors like shadows, muttering about unstable magic and protective wards that pulsed of their own accord. The chamber beneath the Department of Mysteries had been locked again, sealed by spells of the highest order. And though everyone agreed the crisis had passed, Hermione knew otherwise. Something in her had changed. She could feel it in her fingertips when she touched her wand, in the tremor of the air, when she cast even the simplest charm. Her reflection had returned, but so had something else. An awareness, a hum in her blood that did not belong to ordinary magic. At night, she dreamed of mirrors. Sometimes she saw herself standing before 1,000 reflections, each one slightly different, some older, some younger, some wearing expressions she could not remember ever making. Other times she saw the mirror's surface rippling like dark water, her reflection smiling faintly from within. The words always came the same way, soft as breath. "Remember me." One evening, long after the ministry had emptied and the golden torches burned low, Hermione sat alone in her office. Parchments lay scattered before her. Reports of the missing now returned, though none remembered where they had been. They spoke only of dreams, of wandering through fog and hearing a woman's voice guiding them back. She closed the last report and stared at the silent walls. "It's over," she whispered aloud. "It must be." But as the words left her lips, the lamplight flickered. The shadows around the room stirred, bending oddly. She frowned, stood, and turned toward the mirror that hung on the far wall. Her reflection was there, steady, calm, ordinary. She almost laughed at her own nerves. Then the reflection blinked twice. Hermione's breath caught. She hadn't blinked at all. The reflection tilted its head slightly, lips curving into the faintest smile. "You did well," it said, though its voice came from inside her mind. She staggered backward. No, you're gone. I ended it." "Did you?" whispered the voice. "You restored balance, yes. But balance is not silence. I am part of you now, your memory, your mirror. You cannot banish what you chose to keep." Hermione's hands trembled. "Then what do you want?" "Only to remind you," the voice murmured, that every light casts a shadow. Even you. The reflection faded, and the room returned to stillness. That night she could not bring herself to return home. She walked the streets of London instead, cloak pulled tight, her steps echoing faintly against the wet stones. The world outside the ministry looked the same, yet she felt separated from it, like a ghost walking among the living. Near dawn, she found herself before a familiar doorway, the Leaky Cauldron. The old inn stood quiet at that hour, its windows misted and warm. Tom the barkeep glanced up as she entered. "Been a while, Miss Granger," he said, his voice kind but cautious. "You look like you've seen a banshee." She smiled faintly. "Something close." She took a seat near the fire, letting the warmth chase the cold from her bones. A few early risers muttered over their cups, none giving her much notice. It was a relief to be among ordinary noise again, where no mirrors watched and no echoes spoke. But just as she lifted her tea, a familiar voice called her name. "Hermione?" She turned. Ron stood by the doorway, his red hair a tangled halo in the firelight. He grinned, though his eyes searched hers carefully. "Harry told me you've been working yourself half mad again." Hermione sighed. "He exaggerates." He pulled up a chair beside her. "Maybe. But we're worried about you. You've been different since that mirror business." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "You don't have to worry, Ron. It's over." He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. But if you ever need to talk, really talk, you know where to find me." She smiled, genuine this time. "Thank you." After breakfast, she returned home. The sun had risen, soft and pale through the clouds. She stepped inside, hung her cloak, and paused. A faint sound drifted through the sitting room, a rustle like pages turning. Her heart skipped. She followed it quietly and found an open book upon her desk. It was her own journal, the one she had sealed after the war. The pages fluttered as though moved by invisible hands, and new words appeared upon the parchment, written in her own handwriting. "There is one last reflection unaccounted for." Hermione stared at the words, unable to breathe. The ink shimmered faintly, as if wet with light. "Who are you?" she whispered. The air stirred. A voice, not the reflections this time, but older, quieter, answered from nowhere and everywhere. "I am what remains." Before she could react, the writing continued on its own. "The mirror's power did not end with your memory. Every life it touched left an imprint. Fragments remain, in glass, in dreams, in shadow. Seek the last piece, or the illusions will rise again." The candle beside her flared, its flame stretching tall. The scent of old dust and silver filled the room, the same scent that had haunted the mirror's chamber. Hermione snatched up her wand. "Show yourself." Nothing moved. The room returned to silence. Only the faint hum of magic remained, low and restless. Her mind raced. The message couldn't be a trick. The mirror had held hundreds of reflections, each connected to the people it copied. If one fragment survived, one piece of the mirror still active, it could begin the cycle again. She knew what she had to do. By noon, she was back at the ministry, standing once more before the sealed door of the Department of Mysteries. 2 Aurors guarded the entrance, their expressions firm. "I need access," she said briskly. "Orders from the minister," one replied. "No one enters." Hermione met his gaze evenly. "Then consider this an override. I helped seal it. If there's danger within, it's my responsibility." A moment's hesitation, and then the Auror stepped aside. She descended the long staircase, her footsteps echoing softly. The air grew colder, with each level heavy with the scent of stone and time. When she reached the bottom, the door recognized her magic and opened with a reluctant sigh. The chamber was as she remembered, silent, empty, the great mirror standing dormant in the center. Its surface was dull now, no longer reflecting light. She approached slowly. "Are you still there?" she asked softly. Her reflection appeared faint and ghost-like. "Always?" "There's another fragment," Hermione said. "Something left unbound." The reflection nodded. "You will find it beyond this chamber. The mirror's twin, its shadow, was created to hold the excess magic. It lies hidden in the old catacombs beneath the ministry." Hermione frowned. "I thought there was only one mirror." "There were two," said the reflection, her voice barely audible. "One remembers, the other forgets." The torches flickered. The air rippled as though stirred by unseen wings. Hermione turned toward the passage at the back of the chamber, a place she'd never noticed before. The stone there shimmered faintly, veiled by an ancient concealment charm. She raised her wand. Aperio veritas. The spell struck and the illusion fell away. Behind it, a narrow stair descended into darkness. From the depths came the faintest echo, like the sound of breathing. Hermione swallowed, drew her cloak tighter, and began to descend. Each step took her deeper into shadow, where the walls glistened with moisture and whispers rode the air. At last she reached a small cavern. In its center stood a mirror far older than the one above. Its frame was cracked, its glass clouded, yet its presence was unmistakable. This was no mirror of memory. It was a mirror of forgetting. She stepped closer. Her reflection was faint, blurred, as if the glass refused to recall her shape. Then from the mirror's depths a second voice spoke, a whisper heavy with sorrow. "You should not have come." Hermione froze. The surface stirred and a shape began to emerge, not her reflection, not even human, but a shadow with her face hidden, its voice trembling with ancient grief. "You carry what was lost," it said, "but balance demands its price. The memory you reclaimed has awakened what should have slept forever." "What are you?" she breathed. The shadow's eyes gleamed faintly. "I am the forgetting. I am what you cast away." The ground shuddered. Cracks spidered through the mirror's frame. Hermione's wand hand tightened as the shadow began to stretch, its form twisting toward her. "The world remembers too much," it whispered, "and now it will forget again." Light exploded from the mirror, and Hermione raised her wand to meet it. The battle between memory and oblivion had begun anew, and this time the price would be greater than she could imagine. The light that burst from the mirror was neither pure nor kind. It was the kind of light that revealed too much, the kind that stripped away shadow and truth alike. Hermione threw her arm across her face. As the force of it struck her, the ground beneath her feet trembled, and the walls of the catacombs shuddered with an ancient groan. When the brilliance faded, she found herself standing not in darkness, but in a pale, colorless world. The air shimmered faintly like the surface of a frozen lake. The cracked mirror still stood behind her, but its glass was now a doorway, its depths swirling with light. Hermione turned slowly. Before her stretched a vast expanse of shifting mist. Shapes drifted within it, half-formed figures, echoes of memories that whispered faintly as they passed. She recognized faces among them. Some she knew, others she had only seen once in her life. teachers, students, even enemies. She had crossed into the mirror's other half, the place where all forgotten things went. Her breath came fast, clouding the air before her. "So this is what the world forgets," she murmured. The mist stirred at her words, and from it emerged the shadow that had spoken before. It was taller now, its shape more defined, its movement smooth as flowing ink. Where its face should have been, the air shimmered with faint light, like the reflection of a candle on dark water. "You crossed the veil," it said softly. "Few have done so and returned whole." Hermione's wand gleamed in her hand. "Then I'll be the first." The shadow inclined its head. "You cannot fight what you do not remember. You carry memories that are not meant to exist. I am here to take them back. I won't let you." The shadow's laughter was quiet, almost human. "You already have." The mist thickened around them, curling like smoke. Figures began to step forth from it, more of the half-remembered, their eyes blank and gleaming. They circled her slowly, their presence pressing against her mind like the weight of dreams. Hermione raised her wand. "Finite!" The spell struck one of the phantoms and tore through it, scattering mist like ash. But two more took its place, then three. The whispers grew louder, soft, insistent voices calling her name, speaking in fragments of her own thoughts. "You wanted to forget. You chose peace over truth. You buried me." Her heart pounded. "Get out of my head!" She cast another spell, Protego, and a barrier of shimmering gold surrounded her. The phantoms pressed against it, their forms distorting against the light. For a moment it held. Then the shadow raised its hand, the shield shattered like glass. Hermione stumbled backward, landing hard against the cold stone. Her wand hand trembled, but her resolve did not. She forced herself to stand, her mind racing through every spell she'd ever learned. No ordinary magic could destroy what was born from memory itself. And then an idea struck her. The reflection, her reflection. She had merged with it once. That meant part of her still existed within the realm of memory, the part that remembered everything. If she could call that piece of herself back, she might be able to bridge the two worlds again. Closing her eyes, Hermione took a deep breath. "I remember," she whispered. The mist stilled. She focused on every moment she had lived, the first spell she'd ever cast, the laughter of her friends, the terror of battle, the warmth of victory, the tears she'd never let anyone see. She remembered the weight of every choice, every sacrifice, every mistake, and through it all she felt a flicker of warmth within her chest, a spark of gold light that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. From the distance, a familiar voice echoed, her own, calm and steady. "You have always been both, the one who remembers and the one who forgets." Hermione opened her eyes. Her reflection stood before her once more, bathed in golden light. She looked stronger now, clearer, no longer just a shadow of memory. The reflection turned to the dark figure that loomed nearby. "You cannot take what is whole," the shadow hissed, its form rippling violently. "You cannot remain together. The mind cannot hold both memory and forgetting." Hermione stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with her reflection. "Then we'll teach it how." They raised their hands as one. Golden light and silver mist collided in the air, the sound like thunder contained within stone. The entire chamber shook, cracks racing along the mirror's frame. The shadow screamed, a sound that carried the anguish of 1,000 lost thoughts as the light engulfed it, When the storm subsided, Hermione fell to her knees, gasping for breath. Her reflection knelt beside her, eyes warm with understanding. "It's done," the reflection said softly. "The forgetting is sealed." Hermione looked around. The mists had cleared, revealing the true catacomb beyond, old stone, glimmering with a faint residue of ancient spells. The cracked mirror lay before her, dark now, its surface smooth and lifeless. "Will you go now?" Hermione asked quietly. Her reflection smiled faintly. "I am you. I never truly left. But now you carry all that was lost and all that was forgotten." Hermione felt tears prick her eyes.
"What if I forget again? Then remember this," her reflection whispered. "Light and shadow are the same story told two ways." And with that, the reflection faded, folding back into her, dissolving into golden motes that sank beneath her skin. Hermione closed her eyes, letting the warmth settle in her chest like the final note of a song. When she rose, the catacomb was still. The danger had passed. She made her way back through the winding tunnels, each step lighter than the last. By the time she emerged into the upper halls of the ministry, dawn was breaking above London. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching on her hair, her wand, the faint shimmer in her eyes that spoke of something no one else could see. Harry was waiting for her at the entrance, worry etched deep into his face. "You disappeared again," he said quietly. "I almost sent a team after you." Hermione managed a small, tired smile. "I found what I was looking for." He studied her for a moment. "And are you all right?" She nodded slowly. For the first time in a long while. "Yes." As they stepped out into the morning light, the streets below sparkled with the quiet life of London, carriages rolling, owls gliding through pale sky, wizards and muggles alike beginning another day. But Hermione paused once, looking at her reflection in a passing window. This time it matched her perfectly. No delays, no flicker of golden eyes. And yet when she smiled, she thought she heard a soft echo of laughter. Not separate but intertwined with her own, the balance had been restored. Still, far below the ministry, deep where no light ever reached, the broken mirror of forgetting lay dormant. Its surface was dark, its frame cracked beyond repair, but deep within the glass, a faint shimmer stirred, like the heartbeat of something sleeping, waiting for a name, to call it awake once more. For many weeks after her descent into the catacombs, Hermione moved through her days as though waking from a long dream. The ordinary world seemed strangely fragile now, as if she could see through the thin veil of magic that cloaked all things. Every reflection, a window pane, a puddle, the polished surface of a teacup, seemed alive with quiet watchfulness. She caught herself studying her own image often, searching for some trace of that other self who had stood beside her in the dark. The ministry too felt changed. There were new policies, new wards, and new faces in the Department of Mysteries. Unspeakables, who eyed her with both respect and fear. They knew what she had done. They whispered of her victory in the shadows, calling her the mirror's keeper. But Hermione took no pride in the name. Victory, she had learned, often came with a cost unseen. Harry and Ron checked on her often. They tried to draw her back into normal life, into dinners with friends and quiet laughter in the Burrows' kitchen. She smiled, she listened, but part of her always remained elsewhere, wandering those dreamlike halls where memory and forgetting
had once met in battle. It was in early autumn, when the leaves turned gold and the air smelled faintly of smoke, that the first sign appeared. Hermione was walking along the Thames after leaving the ministry late one evening. The sun had set, and the city lights shimmered upon the water like scattered stars. As she paused on the bridge, she saw her reflection in the dark river below, and saw, just for an instant, two figures standing side by side. One was herself, the other, a faint pale outline, wore no expression, no color, a mere shadow of form. Then it was gone. She stood for a long time staring into the rippling water, her pulse echoing in her ears. "It's not possible," she whispered. "You're gone." But she could not shake the feeling that something had stirred again, something she had thought buried deep beneath the earth. The following morning, Hermione arrived at the ministry early, determined to put her fears to rest. She descended into the Department of Mysteries with special authorization, her wand light cutting through the gloom. The air down there was cold as winter, and every sound seemed to carry too far. When she reached the sealed door, the one that led to the lower catacombs, she hesitated. Her last visit had nearly broken her, yet some unspoken pull urged her forward. She whispered the unlocking charm she herself had crafted weeks ago. The runes on the door glowed briefly, and the heavy stone parted with a soft sigh. The mirror of forgetting was gone. Hermione's breath caught. Only the bare stone dais remained, empty and cold. The protective wards were still intact, yet the presence that had lain beneath them was missing, as though it had slipped quietly away in the night. A faint trail of silvery dust marked the floor, leading toward the deeper tunnels beyond. "No," she murmured, voice trembling. "Not again." She followed the trail through twisting corridors, past old chambers filled with forgotten relics and failed enchantments. Here were the bones of experiments too dangerous to destroy, the remnants of clocks that measured thought, pools of glass that remembered voices. The deeper she went, the more the air shimmered with unstable magic, thick and alive. Finally, she entered a narrow hall where a faint, rhythmic glow pulsed ahead. It was the light of a spell breathing. There, standing before a cracked stone wall, was an unspeakable, cloaked in black, wand raised. The silvery dust had gathered around him in a soft spiral. Hermione recognized him at once. Aldous Crane, a quiet scholar of illusion magic, brilliant but reckless. "Aldous!" she called, her voice echoing. He turned sharply, startled. "Hermione? You shouldn't be here." "What are you doing?" she demanded. "I'm following the residual signature," he replied, eyes fever bright. "The mirror left a trace of its enchantment when it vanished." "It's alive, Hermione, alive and moving. Don't you understand what this means? If we can harness that power—" "Stop!" Hermione cried. "You don't know what you're dealing with." He gave a short, almost pitying laugh. "You sealed it, yes, but you didn't destroy it. Magic that ancient doesn't die. It hides, and I can call it back." Before she could reach him, he struck his wand against the stone. The wall split open with a deafening crack, revealing a hollow chamber beyond. Inside, floating in the air like a suspended tear, shimmered a fragment of glass, the last surviving shard of the mirror. It pulsed with faint light, as if it were breathing. Aldous stepped toward it. "Do you see? It remembers us." Hermione's instincts screamed in warning. She raised her wand. "Aldous, move away from it." But he didn't listen. The moment his fingers brushed the glass, the air exploded with light. The shard rose spinning, and a wave of cold radiated outward, sweeping through the hall like a storm. Aldous cried out, his voice swallowed by the roar of magic. When the light faded, he was gone. The shard hung motionless for a moment, then drifted toward Hermione. She stood frozen, unable to move. Within its depths, something shifted, a shape forming, slow and deliberate. Her own face looked back at her, not the reflection she had known before, but another, darker, colder. The eyes were pale and endless, void of emotion. "You cannot bind what was born of thought," the reflection said. "The forgetting was mine. You took it from me, and now it returns." Hermione shook her head, heart hammering. "No, you're not real. You're the residue of the mirror's curse." The voice was soft, but filled with certainty. "I am what remains when the mind remembers too much." The shard trembled, then shattered into hundreds of smaller pieces. Each fragment rose into the air, spinning around her like stars in orbit. Their light filled the hall with shifting shadows, every flicker a glimpse of memory, faces, laughter, tears, all swirling in a blinding dance. She cast a spell of containment. "Contineo!" But the fragments passed through her barrier as if it were mist. They wove together, forming a whirling column of silver light that reached toward the ceiling. From its center, a figure began to emerge, neither wholly human nor wholly ghost. The voice that spoke now echoed with many tones, as though hundreds of memories spoke in unison. "You cannot carry all you have taken. To remember everything is to destroy the self." Hermione gritted her teeth. "I will not let you take this world again." "Then you must forget it." The light surged toward her. She raised her wand, bracing for the impact. Magic met magic, her golden light against its cold silver, and the force of it tore through the chamber, scattering debris like leaves in a storm. The floor split beneath her feet. She fell to one knee, struggling to hold the spell. The voice thundered in her mind. "Memory cannot be caged." With a final cry, she released her power. The explosion of light was blinding. When silence fell again, the hall was empty. The shard was gone. Hermione stood alone amid the ruins, her breath ragged, her magic spent. Her reflection flickered faintly in the broken glass scattered across the floor. This time it did not smile. She whispered into the silence, "It's not over, is it?" From somewhere deep within the shadows, faint and distant, came the reply, her own voice weary and soft. "Not yet." And so the light dimmed, and the world above remained blissfully unaware that the boundaries of memory had begun to tremble once more. The days following Aldous Crane's disappearance passed in uneasy quiet. The ministry sealed off the lower halls once more, but even the thickest wards could not contain rumor. Whispers moved faster than parchment. Tales of a mirror shard that glowed like a star, and a witch seen walking alone through the catacombs after midnight. Hermione said little of what had happened. She filed her report with exacting care, omitting only what could not be explained. Voices, reflections, memories that spoke. She told Harry and Ron that Aldous had been consumed by residual energy, that there was nothing left to recover. It was, in part, the truth. But at night, when she closed her eyes, she saw him. His face caught in that blinding light, his expression one of awe rather than fear. "It remembers us," he had said, and in her dreams, she saw that same light growing, expanding, becoming something vast enough to swallow thought itself. Autumn deepened. The ministry grew busier with each shortening day, and Hermione's duties multiplied. She buried herself in work, as she always had. But beneath her calm precision, the unease remained. Spells misfired around her at odd moments. ink pots trembling on her desk, doors opening when no one stood near. Magic, her own or something else's, was restless. On the 5th evening after the incident, she returned home to find Crookshanks staring fixedly at the mirror in her hallway. The cat's tail lashed, his fur bristling, though there was nothing there but her own reflection. She knelt beside him, murmuring softly, "What is it, old boy?" His gaze never wavered. In the reflection, behind her shoulder, she saw movement, a faint flicker, like a candle seen through glass. When she turned, the air shimmered, and for an instant, the house smelled faintly of rain and silver dust. Hermione gripped her wand. "Enough," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "You will not frighten me." The shimmer faded, yet the silence that followed was not empty. It was listening. That night, unable to sleep, she went to her study and opened the ancient texts she'd brought back from the department's archives. She read of mirrors and memory, of spells once deemed too perilous for use. One passage caught her attention, a fragment translated from runes older than Hogwarts itself. All things remembered seek form. When thought becomes reflection, and reflection hungers for flesh, it will return in the image of its maker. She traced the words with her fingertips, her stomach twisting. If the mirror's fragment still lived, it might not remain only as light or voice. It could become. By dawn, her course was set. She gathered her robes, her wand, and a small pouch of enchanted sand, the same dust used to stabilize time turners. If there was a chance to track the shard, she would find it before anyone else did. She could not bear to let another soul vanish into the glass. The trail began in dreams. Hermione was standing in the corridor of the department once more, though the torches were out and the air was still. The floor beneath her shimmered faintly, a surface both solid and fluid. As she moved, her reflection followed until it stepped out of the floor and stood before her, silent, waiting. It was not the golden-eyed reflection of memory, nor the cold shadow of forgetting, but something between them, a face both hers and not hers. "Where are you?" Hermione whispered. The reflection tilted its head. "Closer than you think." Then the dream broke, and she woke with a cry, her wand still clutched in her hand. The air in her room smelled faintly of ozone. On her nightstand lay a fine dusting of glittering powder, the same kind she had found in the catacombs. It was not a dream. Within the hour, she was back at the ministry. The guards at the lower levels let her pass without question. Her authority in such matters was absolute now. She descended into the depths once more, the faint glow of her wand, the only light. As she approached the sealed chamber where the mirror had once stood, she felt it. The same cold pulse she had sensed in the catacombs. It came not from ahead, but from beyond the stone itself, behind the wards and walls. She pressed her palm to the rock, closed her eyes, and whispered an awakening charm. The surface rippled beneath her touch. A doorway appeared, ancient and narrow. Beyond it, a stair spiraled down into blackness. The air that met her was colder than any she'd felt before. It smelled of old dust and forgotten dreams. As she descended, the steps seemed endless, carved from stone so old it hummed faintly with memory. At last she reached a small chamber lit by a single unnatural glow. There, hovering in midair, was the shard. It was larger now, its surface smooth and perfect, reflecting not the chamber but a vast, shifting horizon. Hermione stepped forward cautiously. "I know you," she said. "You're what's left of the mirror. But you don't belong here. The magic that binds you will destroy itself if you keep feeding on. The shard pulsed sharply, cutting her off. Its reflection deepened, and within its surface a figure appeared. Aldous Crane. Hermione's breath caught. "No." He smiled faintly, eyes glimmering with silver light. "You see, I was right. It remembers." "You're not real," she whispered. "I am what it made of me," he replied. "It took my memory, my essence, and gave it shape, and now it is doing what it was always meant to do. Reflect the world as it truly is." The chamber began to tremble. Images flashed within the shard, faces from the Ministry, from Hogwarts, from the streets above. Every reflection in London was shimmering, aligning with this one piece of glass. Hermione realized, too late, what was happening. The shard was rebuilding the mirror, not beneath the earth, but through every surface that reflected light. "Stop it," she cried, raising her wand. "You'll tear the boundary apart." Aldous, or the thing wearing his face, laughed softly. "The boundary was never meant to last." She cast the strongest sealing spell she knew, a golden barrier that flared outward, but the shard pulsed brighter, absorbing the magic, growing stronger. The light filled the chamber, crawling up the walls, reaching for her. Hermione fell to one knee, her wand shaking. She could feel the mirror's hunger, its need to remember, to reflect, to become. And then, through the roar of magic, she heard another voice. "Hermione." She turned. Her reflection, her true reflection, stood at the edge of the light, golden-eyed and calm. "You cannot fight this alone," it said. Hermione's heart ached. "I thought you were gone." "I am part of you," the reflection said simply, "and together we are stronger than what was made." They raised their hands as one. The light of the shard surged forward, but the golden glow of their joined power met it head-on. The two forces collided, twisting, folding, merging. For a moment, all sound vanished. Only the heartbeat of the world remained. When the brilliance faded, the chamber was still. The shard lay upon the ground, cracked once more. Aldous' image was gone. The reflections above had quieted. The mirror's rebuilding had stopped. Hermione sank to the floor, exhaustion sweeping through her. Her reflection lingered beside her, faint but smiling. "You did it," the reflection whispered. "But this is not its end. The mirror was never a single object. It was a spell, and spells remember." Hermione nodded weakly. "Then we'll be ready." The reflection's light dimmed, and she was alone again. When she emerged from the catacombs hours later, dawn was breaking once more over London. The river shone like a ribbon of glass beneath the morning sun. For the first time, Hermione did not look away from her reflection. She met its gaze and saw not fear or shadow, but calm understanding. Two halves, balanced once again. Yet far below the waking city, deep in the old stones of the Ministry, a sliver of glass still glimmered faintly. Its surface rippled as if breathing, and in its depths, a single whisper echoed. "All things remembered, seek form." The world above carried on in its quiet rhythm, unknowing. To most, the weeks after the mirror's final shattering were peaceful. The skies cleared earlier, autumn light lingered longer, and the strange disturbances that had haunted the wizarding world seemed to fade into memory. But Hermione Granger knew peace was rarely the end of things. It was only the pause before something new began. She had resumed her duties at the Ministry, though she often worked alone now, her office dim and lined with shelves of books that never slept. Every night she pored through ancient records of magical artifacts, of spells that bound thought to form and time to memory. Each account ended the same way, with warnings, with erasures, with silence. No one had ever dared to map the mirror's true nature, not even the unspeakables. It was late one evening when she found a clue, not in a ministry archive, but in the private collection of a forgotten wizard whose journals had recently been recovered from a vault near Godric's Hollow. The author had been one of the earliest practitioners of illusion magic. His writings spoke of mirrors that were not made but born, living conduits between the conscious and the unseen. One phrase had been repeated many times, circled in fading ink. Reflections are the language of the soul. Hermione sat back in her chair, the candlelight trembling. The mirror wasn't only magic, she whispered. It was memory made alive. Ours, theirs, everyone's. She understood then that what she had faced was no simple enchantment. The mirror was an echo of the human mind, ancient as the first spell ever cast, and echoes, she knew, could never be fully silenced. The following day she sought counsel from the one person whose understanding of the mind surpassed her own. Luna Lovegood. Hermione found her in a sunlit greenhouse outside Ottery St. Catchpole, surrounded by fluttering vines and softly humming creatures that glowed like bottled moonlight. Luna greeted her with her usual faraway smile, as if she'd been expecting this visit all along. "You've seen the mirror's heart?" Luna said, motioning her to sit. "It must have left traces behind." Hermione nodded. "Dreams, whispers, sometimes. I think the reflections are still trying to speak." Luna tilted her head, studying her. "Do they frighten you?" "No," Hermione admitted, "but I don't understand what they want." Luna's gaze wandered to a pool of still water beside them. "Mirrors are honest things. They show what we hide. Perhaps what you hear are not ghosts, but questions that haven't yet been answered." Hermione looked down at the pool. Her reflection wavered slightly as though the water were breathing. "What if they're trying to come back?" she asked. Luna's expression softened. "Then perhaps they never truly left." They spoke long into the evening. By the time Hermione left, twilight had gathered across the fields, and a gentle mist hung over the road. Luna's words lingered in her thoughts, honest, elusive, and somehow true. That night, Hermione dreamed again. She was walking through a long corridor lined with mirrors, each one reflecting a different time in her life. The girl who had first stepped into Hogwarts, the young woman who had faced Voldemort, the weary witch who now carried the burden of knowledge too heavy for sleep. But as she passed each mirror, her reflections turned their heads to follow her. "You can't walk away forever," they whispered. "You belong to what you remember." At the corridor's end stood a single mirror, vast and unblemished. Its frame was carved with runes she recognized, identical to those once etched into the mirror of memory, but this one did not shimmer with silver light. Instead, it glowed with a soft golden warmth. Hermione stepped closer, her reflection waited within, calm and radiant. "You called me," it said. "I didn't mean to," Hermione replied. "Yes, you did," said the reflection gently. "You wanted to know if it was truly over, and now you do." The mirror rippled. The air around her trembled. Hermione reached out instinctively, and her fingertips touched the glass. Light blossomed around her, but it was not cold or cruel this time. It felt like sunlight through leaves, like memory healed rather than reopened. She felt the world expand, and for a moment she saw everything: the mirror, the catacombs, the ministry, every reflection in every window, every drop of water that ever caught a spark of light, all connected, all alive. Then she woke. Her room was silent, bathed in the pale gray of dawn, but on her bedside table lay something that had not been there before. A small shard of glass, no larger than a coin. Its surface shimmered faintly, not with silver, but with gold. Hermione stared at it for a long time. There was no fear in her, only a quiet certainty that this was not the mirror's revenge, but its remembrance. The fragment did not pulse with hunger or whisper with stolen voices. It was still, as if waiting. In the days that followed, she kept the shard with her, sealed within a glass pendant around her neck. She felt its faint warmth when she worked, when she slept, when she stood before mirrors and found her reflection whole once more. But her peace was short-lived. In late November, the sky over London darkened without warning. Clouds gathered unnaturally fast, swirling above the ministry like a storm of ink. Wizards and witches poured into the atrium in confusion as the very air shimmered. Hermione arrived just as the first wave of magic hit, a gust of invisible force that rattled every pane of glass in the city. From the surface of the great fountain in the center of the hall, ripples spread outward. Faces appeared in the water, hundreds of them, silent, half-formed, reaching upward. "It's starting again," someone cried. Hermione pushed through the crowd, her heart hammering. The golden shard beneath her cloak burned hot against her skin. The fountain's water surged, rising like a column of living glass. But when she raised her wand, she felt something else stir within her, not fear, not anger, but recognition. The water shimmered, and her reflection appeared atop its surface. Not the golden-eyed version, not the shadow, but herself, as she was, as she had become. The reflection smiled faintly. "Do you see now? It was never about destruction. The mirror was the world remembering itself." Hermione's wand trembled in her hand. "Then why the pain? Why the loss?" "Because memory hurts before it heals," said the reflection. "You carried what others could not. Now the world remembers through you." The golden light from her pendant spread, flowing into the fountain's surface. The reaching faces grew still. The storm outside began to fade, its darkness thinning into morning gray. When the last shimmer died away, the hall was quiet. The water lay calm once more. Hermione stood motionless, the golden shard cold against her skin. Around her, the ministry bustled with relief, though none could explain what had happened. But she knew. The mirror's magic had not been evil, it had been incomplete, yearning to reconcile the broken halves of thought and truth. That night, standing again on the bridge over the Thames, she looked down at the river. Her reflection rippled in the dark water, steady and whole. For the first time she smiled, not in triumph, but in peace. And far beneath the city, in chambers forgotten by all but her, the last fragments of the mirror rested quietly. Their light had dimmed to a gentle glow, neither silver nor gold, but something in between, a color found only in dreams. The world had not been remade. It had only remembered itself. And Hermione, the keeper of reflections, walked home beneath the fading stars, the river whispering softly at her side, like an old friend who no longer needed to be feared. Winter settled upon London like a spell of silence,
Snow drifted over the ministry's roof and the narrow streets beyond, blanketing the wizarding world in stillness. The strange storm that had shaken the skies was remembered now as a rare magical disturbance, an event already fading into rumor. Yet Hermione Granger knew better. Beneath the calm, something subtle had changed. The world, she felt, was listening in a way it had not before. In her office, she kept the golden shard sealed in glass, its faint warmth pulsing like a quiet heartbeat. The unspeakables had asked to study it, of course, but she refused. It was no artifact, no weapon, no curse. It was a remnant of memory itself, and she would not see it dissected. She worked late each night, the candlelight reflected in her spectacles, and sometimes she caught her own reflection watching her with quiet approval, as though the mirror within her still lingered. Then came the first message. It arrived in the form of a letter, delivered by owl without seal or signature. The parchment was old, edges frayed, its ink dark as smoke. The words were few. To the keeper of reflections. The glass stirs again. Beneath the ruins of Durmstrang, the echo awakens. Hermione read the note thrice. The handwriting was neat, steady, and entirely unfamiliar. Durmstrang, that old school of the north, whose halls had long been rumored to contain relics of ancient magic far older than Hogwarts. Could it be that the mirror's echo, its twin, its shadow, had found a new home there? By the following morning she had packed her trunk and sent word to Harry and Ron. Both protested, of course. Harry offered to accompany her. Ron begged her not to go at all, but Hermione had learned long ago that some paths must be walked alone. The journey north was long and bitter. She traveled first by Portkey to a frozen village nestled between mountains, where the air shimmered with northern light and the lakes were mirrors of black ice. From there she walked the final miles through snow, so deep it swallowed sound itself. Durmstrang stood before her at last, a fortress of dark stone carved into the mountainside, its towers sharp as fangs against the winter sky. The students had left for the season. Only a handful of teachers remained. The headmaster, a grave man named Alexei Volkov, received her with wary respect. "We have heard of you, Madam Granger," he said in a voice rough as gravel. "England's ministry whispers your name as though it were a spell. What brings you to our door?" Hermione met his gaze evenly. "An echo of magic. Something old, something I once encountered. I have reason to believe it lies beneath your school." At that, Volkov's expression darkened. He dismissed his aides and led her through shadowed corridors lit by blue fire. "We have sealed the lower vaults for decades," he said. "Even our professors do not walk there. The ice grows thin, and beneath it strange reflections stir. Some call it cursed, I call it hungry." He stopped before a set of iron doors etched with frost. "If you go further, you go alone." "I understand," Hermione said softly. The door groaned open. Beyond lay a vast cavern, its walls carved from black ice, its floor reflecting her steps like polished glass. Her wand light glimmered on the frozen ceiling, casting 1,000 ghostly reflections. The air was cold enough to burn. As she descended, she felt that old hum return, the deep, resonant thrum of magic alive beneath stone. It was not hostile, but it was watchful, ancient. The shard at her throat grew warm, its golden glow spilling through her cloak. At the cavern's heart lay a circle of broken mirrors half buried in frost. They were nothing like the mirror of memory she had faced before. These were primitive, their surfaces uneven, their frames carved
with symbols that predated Hogwarts itself, yet each fragment shimmered faintly, as if remembering light long lost.
Hermione knelt beside one and brushed away the snow. The reflection that met her eyes was not her own. It was the face of a young woman, pale and solemn, her expression calm yet pleading. "Who are you?" Hermione whispered. The reflection's lips moved soundlessly, then the answer came, not from the glass, but from within Hermione's mind. "I am the first." The cavern darkened. The frost beneath her hands melted into silver mist. All at once she saw visions, brief, brilliant flashes of the past, ancient witches weaving spells beside pools of water, their faces painted with runes, their reflections moving independent of their flesh. She saw a mirror being born, not forged by wand or hammer, but drawn out of thought and will, the first link between mind and magic. And she saw it fracture. When the vision faded, Hermione was trembling. The air around her shimmered with memory, the reflections whispering softly like leaves in wind. The shard against her chest burned suddenly hot. She pulled it free, holding it aloft. The reflections turned toward it as though recognizing their kin. A voice filled the cavern, soft, echoing, ancient beyond words. "You carry the memory of our beginning," it said, "and you have come to our end." Light flared from the ice, spreading in rings until it filled the cavern. In the glow stood the same figure she had glimpsed in the glass. A woman of ethereal beauty, her eyes as clear as the mirror's heart. Hermione knew at once she was no ghost. She was a thought preserved by the first spell ever to bind memory to reflection. "What do you want of me?" Hermione asked. The figure smiled sadly. "To remember." The mirror was not a weapon, Hermione Granger. It was a bridge to hold the minds of the living and the echoes of the lost. You sealed it once, but memory cannot be destroyed. It seeks form anew. "Then it will rise again," Hermione said, voice tight. The figure nodded. "Unless it is bound to one who remembers willingly. That is why you were chosen. You carry both halves, memory and forgetting. You can hold what others cannot." Hermione's throat tightened. "And if I refuse, then the world will remember everything and lose itself beneath the weight." The light dimmed, the cavern trembled. The reflections began to wail, soft at first, then rising to a haunting chorus. Hermione clutched the golden shard, feeling its pulse beat in time with her own heart. She understood now. This was not the mirror's end, but its rebirth, and only through her could it take form without devouring the world. Closing her eyes, she whispered the spell she'd once spoken in the chamber beneath the ministry. The words of sealing turned to words of joining. The shard flared, melting into light. It poured through her hands, into the ice, into every reflection around her. The voices quieted. The cavern grew still. When she opened her eyes, the mirrors were gone. In their place, the ice was clear and calm, holding only her reflection, and behind it, the faintest glow of gold. She stood alone, the weight of centuries pressing softly upon her shoulders, and yet she felt lighter than she had in years. The mirror's story was not finished. It lived now within her, bound not by fear, but by understanding. As she ascended from the cavern, the dawn broke over the mountains. The sky shimmered with the first light of day, and for an instant the snow reflected her face in 1,000 tiny mirrors, each one bright with promise. The keeper of reflections had become their guardian in truth, and the world, ever fragile, ever remembering,
breathed a little easier beneath her watch. The wind howled over the northern mountains as Hermione began her descent from Durmstrang's heights. Snow whispered around her boots, the air glittering with faint flecks of gold that only she could see. Each step felt lighter than the last. Though she knew the truth, she carried more now than ever before. The memory of the mirror, its light, its voices, all lived within her, yet it was not a burden. It was a presence, quiet and warm, as though the world itself had placed its trust in her keeping. For the first time in years, she felt peace. But peace, she knew, was fragile. By the time she reached the small port village below the mountains, the sky had begun to darken. A storm brewed far out to sea, low thunder rolling like the growl of an ancient beast. She took refuge in a modest inn, its windows fogged from the warmth within, its hearth crackling cheerfully. The innkeeper, an old witch with clouded eyes, served her stew and said nothing of her wand or the faint shimmer that clung to her cloak. Hermione ate quietly, listening to the murmurs of travelers, their talk of snowbound roads, of ghosts seen wandering near the cliffs, of mirrors that glowed beneath the ice. She said nothing, but her heart stirred uneasily. That night, as the storm broke, Hermione dreamed once more. She stood upon the shore, the waves frozen mid-motion, their crests sharp as glass. The sea was a vast mirror stretching into darkness. In its depths, faint lights glowed like stars. Her reflection looked back at her, not whole, but divided, each piece carrying a different emotion: grief, hope, anger, love. "You cannot hold all of us," the reflections whispered. "I must," Hermione said. "You will break." "Then I will break," she answered quietly. The reflection closest to her smiled sadly. "That is why you were chosen." A sudden crack split the sea's surface. The reflection shattered. Hermione woke with a gasp, her breath clouding in the cold air of the small room. For a moment she thought she heard glass cracking far away, faint and distant, as though the world itself were dreaming the same dream. By morning the storm had passed. She left the inn early, the wind biting at her cheeks, and made her way toward the nearest Wizarding Portkey station. But even as she prepared to return home, her mind remained troubled. The mirror's power was quiet now, but its nature was unending. All things remembered seek form. She had sealed it again, yes, but for how long? When she arrived back in London, the ministry awaited her like an old and weary friend. The familiar scent of parchment and ink steadied her. Harry met her at the atrium, his expression filled with that mix of relief and quiet concern she'd seen 1,000 times before. "You look like you've walked through a legend," he said. "In a way, I have." He studied her face, then smiled faintly. "You're not going to tell me everything, are you?" "Not yet," she replied, "but I will when the story is finished." He laughed softly. "That's what you said the last time." They parted as friends do, with a touch on the arm, a look that said more than words ever could. Hermione returned to her office and sat for a long while in silence. The golden shard, now bound within her, pulsed faintly with warmth. She could feel its rhythm echoing through her own magic, neither separate nor consuming. A balance had been struck, but peace, as she had learned, never lingered for long. 3 days later, the reports began. Across Britain, wizards and witches were seeing visions in ordinary mirrors. Nothing threatening, not yet, but strange. Some saw places they had never visited. Others glimpsed faces of loved ones long past. A few claimed that the mirrors whispered not in warning, but in comfort. Hermione listened to these accounts with quiet fascination. She visited several of the homes herself, casting careful spells to detect remnants of dark magic, but there were none. Each mirror glowed faintly gold when she approached, and she felt a curious calm. "This isn't corruption," she murmured to herself. "It's awakening." That evening she stood alone in her flat, facing the mirror above her fireplace. For a long time she simply looked at her reflection. The woman who stared back was older, wiser, but her eyes were no longer weary. "You've been busy," said a voice behind her. Hermione turned. Ron stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of tea and grinning sheepishly. "I knocked, but you didn't answer," he said. "Figured you were either dead or reading." "Reading," she said with a small laugh. He handed her a cup and looked past her to the mirror. "You ever think about smashing that thing after all this? I swear, if I caught it winking at me, I'd hex it into dust." "No," Hermione said softly. "Not this one. It's harmless." He shrugged. "If you say so." They talked a while longer of ordinary things. Ginny's latest Quidditch column, Harry's new case, the twins' shop expanding into Hogsmeade again. For a few blessed minutes, Hermione allowed herself to belong entirely to the present, but when Ron left and the flat grew quiet, she turned once more to the mirror. For a moment she saw only her reflection. Then, very faintly, the surface rippled. Behind her image appeared hundreds of others, faces, places, memories, all shimmering in soft light. Not ghosts, not illusions, but echoes of the world, remembering itself. She did not flinch this time. Instead, she whispered, "You're safe now." The reflection seemed to bow, fading gently into the glass until only her own face remained. Weeks passed. Winter deepened. Life went on. Yet Hermione knew her journey was not truly over. One evening, as snow fell quietly outside her window, an owl tapped against the glass. It carried a small letter sealed with wax she did not recognize. She broke it open and read the single line written within. "The light spreads. You are not the only keeper." There was no signature, only a faint smear of gold across the parchment. Hermione folded the letter slowly, her thoughts drifting to the caverns beneath Durmstrang, to the frozen reflections she had awakened. Perhaps others across the world were feeling the same call, the echo of memory stirring in the hearts of those who listened closely enough. She looked once more into the mirror above her hearth. The golden shimmer was gone now. Her reflection was ordinary again. And yet, as she turned away, she thought she saw movement, a flicker of another place, another time. The world of mirrors had opened once more, but this time it was not through hunger or fear. It was through remembrance. For the first time, Hermione smiled without sorrow. Whatever lay ahead, she would not walk alone. The magic of memory of all things that once were and could be again was alive. She lifted her wand toward the darkened glass. "Let the world remember kindly," she whispered. The flame at her wand's tip glowed gold, and the mirror shone faintly in answer. Far away beyond mountain and sea, other lights began to stir. In lakes, in windows, and pools of rainwater, reflections shimmered awake, gentle, luminous, eternal. And somewhere beneath that quiet radiance, the faint echo of a voice, Hermione's voice, spoke through the world's dreaming glass. Nothing truly forgotten ever fades. It only waits to be remembered. The new year came softly to London. The first snow of January fell like feathers across the rooftops, dusting the old stones of Diagon Alley, clinging to lamplight and ivy. Wizards hurried through the cold.
with scarves wrapped tight, unaware that something unseen moved quietly through the city's reflections. A faint glimmer in every pane of glass, a hush that lingered just beyond the edge of sight. Hermione Granger walked through that hush each morning, cloak pulled close, her thoughts far away. The golden shard that had once hung around her neck no longer burned or whispered. It rested against her heart, its power sleeping, yet she felt its presence always. The world had changed after Durmstrang, subtly like a new melody woven through an old song. Mirrors no longer felt cold to her. They felt alive. At the ministry, her colleagues spoke of strange phenomena, reflections that delayed a heartbeat longer than they should, or ripples that passed across glass without cause. Some whispered fearfully of curses returning. Others called it progress. A sign that magic is evolving, said one unspeakable with a nervous laugh. Hermione alone understood it for what it was, the balance between memory and forgetting, alive and shifting. She had become its guardian, though few would ever know it. One evening, as twilight fell across the city, she climbed the spiral stairs of the astronomy tower at the re-established Hogwarts. The headmistress had invited her to give a lecture to the 7th years on magical law and ethics. Yet after the lesson ended, Hermione lingered. She stood upon the balcony, gazing out at the snowbound grounds. The black lake below reflected the stars so perfectly that the world seemed doubled, a sky above, a sky beneath. She heard footsteps behind her. "Still awake, Professor?" It was Neville Longbottom, smiling faintly, his face ruddy from the cold. He carried a small lantern, and the scent of earth clung to his robes. "Habit?" Hermione said softly. "Too many years spent chasing thoughts through the dark." He joined her at the railing. "I've heard the rumors," he said after a moment. "Mirrors behaving oddly, reflections out of step. Is it true?" Hermione hesitated, then nodded. "It's not danger, Neville. It's the world remembering itself. Every memory leaves a trace somewhere. Perhaps we're only now beginning to see them." Neville studied her face. "And you're all right with that?" "I am." He smiled gently. "You always did carry the weight of things better than the rest of us." They spoke for a time of Hogwarts and students, of old friends and new generations who knew their names as history. Then Neville wished her good night and left, his lantern bobbing down the spiral stairs until its light was swallowed by shadow. Hermione remained a while longer. She looked into the lake and saw her reflection gazing back at her, calm and steady. But when she leaned closer, she noticed something extraordinary. The stars reflected beside her were moving, swirling into patterns that formed words. "Remember us." Her breath caught. The letters glimmered, then faded back into starlight. A shiver passed through her, not fear, but awe. The world was speaking still, its memories alive in every mirror, every surface that caught the truth of light. She left the tower long after midnight, her heart filled with a quiet, unshakable wonder. Weeks passed. The snow melted, and early spring painted the countryside green once more. Hermione returned to her work at the ministry. Though she spent more time beyond its walls than within, she traveled often now, to old castles and hidden ruins, to quiet valleys where magic had slept for centuries. Wherever she went, she found traces of the mirror's reach. In a pool beneath the ruins of Tintagel, she saw visions of the first wizards learning to weave spells from spoken dreams. In a cracked mirror at Beauxbatons, she glimpsed her younger self, stubborn and hopeful, studying by candlelight.
And in a still pond deep within the forbidden forest, she saw Ron and Harry as they had once been, laughing together under the stars. Each vision came without warning and left without explanation. But Hermione understood. The world remembered every joy, every sorrow, every act of courage. It was all written in the glass of time itself. She wrote her findings carefully, never publishing them, never speaking of them beyond the circle of those who might understand. To most of the wizarding world, she was still the deputy head of magical law enforcement, a figure of reason and reform. To a few, she was something more, a silent watcher between memory and magic. One night, long after the ministry lamps had dimmed, Hermione sat at her desk, reading by the faint glow of her wand. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of a clock. Then, without warning, the air shimmered. The mirror upon her wall rippled like water. She rose slowly. Her wand remained in her hand, though she did not raise it. Within the glass stood a figure, herself, yet not as she was now. This Hermione was older, her hair streaked with silver, her gaze calm and knowing. "You've come far," said the reflection. Her voice was the same, but deeper, as though carried by time itself. Hermione swallowed hard. "I am what you will be," said the reflection gently, "and what you already are." For a long moment they regarded one another in silence. Then the reflection smiled. "You've done what none before you could. You've given memory peace." "I only tried to understand," Hermione whispered. "That," said the reflection, "was all it ever wanted." The mirror stilled. The image faded, leaving only her own reflection once more. But a golden light lingered for a moment longer, bright as dawn, before fading into the quiet. Hermione stood motionless, her hand pressed to her heart. For the first time since the mirror's awakening, she felt no pull, no hum of magic. The balance had settled. The world no longer needed her to guard its memories. It had learned to remember itself. The following morning she took the golden shard, now dull and cool, and placed it within a small wooden box. She sealed it with a charm of preservation and carried it to the Hall of Records beneath the ministry, where it would rest among relics of history long past. No plaque bore her name. No one would know what it truly was. But that was how it should be. As she turned to leave, she caught her reflection in the polished stone of the corridor wall. It smiled back at her, not as a shadow, nor as a memory, but as a companion walking beside her through the years. Outside, the morning was bright. The city sparkled as though newly washed by rain. Hermione stepped into the light, breathing deep the scent of spring. Somewhere far away, a child laughed at her reflection in a puddle, unaware that the world had once nearly forgotten itself. The laughter echoed faintly, a song of innocence and continuity. Hermione smiled and walked on, her shadow long and golden in the rising sun. And in the quiet heart of the world, where all reflections meet, a whisper passed through the glass, a final echo of the mirror's voice, gentle and eternal. To remember is to live again.